Well, you may not know this, but May is National Foster Care Month, and every month thousands of children enter America's foster care system in this country. Finding a safe home for these kids can be overwhelming for the social workers tasked with that challenge. But across the country, churches are helping ease this burden. Charlene Israel has the story.
These are just a few of the almost 500,000 children in U.S. foster care.
Will I ever be enough to be loved?
I have a dream. This time, someone wanted me and I didn't have to say goodbye.
The Bible speaks of these children and the answer to their needs. Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. Here in Colorado, the faith community is answering the biblical call to care for orphans by connecting children in the state's foster care system with families within the local church who are interested in adoption or foster care. Sharon Ford oversees adoption and foster care services for Colorado's Department of Human Services.
We try to reach out to their relatives. Sometimes relatives aren't equipped to provide that safety net for their loved ones, and so we bring them into foster care. So these two young people.
In 2004, that included nearly 900 children and teenagers. Pastor Robert Gelinas of Denver's Colorado Community Church wanted to give those children a better life. In 2007, he started Project 127, a faith-based organization that encourages Christian parents to rescue kids from the system.
When you look at the sheer number of followers of Jesus, the sheer number of congregations out there, it is very possible for there to be a family waiting for every single child in foster care. But right now what we have is children waiting for families.
Project 127 started out recruiting families to adopt kids. Its focus now includes finding parents willing to foster kids temporarily or long-term. The project's president, Shelley Raddick, says families across the state have stepped up to help.
We have over 400 families from churches in Colorado that are engaged at some point in the process.
Kevin and Janelle Lusk had 8 kids of their own when they were asked to take in more.
We were challenged by Project 127 to consider obeying the word that says, true religion is to minister to widows and orphans in their need. Okay, feet to faith is, what's that look like?
They need those little pieces that they have not gotten.
Yeah.
So, and part of that is that unconditional acceptance and love and playfulness and life-giving that a family can give, not always perfectly, believe me, but we can give a piece, a taste of how God has designed it to be.
Bus, 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 bus.
The Brannon family now uses this school bus to get around after opening their hearts and home to foster kids.
Right now we have 8 children. We have 4 biological or homegrown, is what we call them, 2 handpicked, which we're foster adopt, and then right now we have 2 foster children.
Oh my gosh, you're getting so big. How'd you grow so fast?
I'm 6.
Biological son Zach enjoys having new siblings from time to time.
I love them with all my heart. We have great times together, and we just feel great.
Jonathan Good calls on the body of Christ to engage in orphan care in his film, Faultless. He also highlights the problem of finding homes for older foster kids who are often overlooked.
Some of us have got to start saying, we will care for you no matter how hard it is, because we think that Christ is worth it, and because we think you are worth it.
Worth it, but not always easy. That's why many believe the church is the answer.
Churches are used to dealing with crisis, used to trying to help families deal with whatever issues that they're facing. And so when a family goes through a difficult time, while adoption and foster care may have its unique challenges, there is a ready-made care structure in a church. And so Project 127 is seeking to bring the whole church to a child, not just a family, but then there's a whole church around that family.
Charlene Israel, CBN News, Denver, Colorado.
Well, Project 127 is awesome. It's just one of many organizations that are helping children in the foster care system. Well, Jed Medifin is the president of the Christian Alliance for Orphans, and he used to be special assistant to George Bush. He's also the co-author of the new book, Upended. He's joining us to talk about this subject. Ted, welcome to the 700 Club.
Thank you, Terry.
You say that often children who are in the foster care system are invisible. What do you mean by that and why?
Well, you know, all of our lives are so busy to the brim right now. And so the stories of the foster child so often don't make the front page. They're the quiet hurt, that ache. I think of a girl who beat the odds. She worked hard through high school, made it to earn graduation, but she didn't want to walk across the stage. And her social worker encouraged her and praised her. And finally it came out, she said, I don't want to walk across that stage because if I do, no one will be there to clap for me.
Oh my.
And you know, that's not a story that's going to make the headlines, and yet that hurt is right where the people of God should be.
You know, another hurt that comes to mind as you say that is that when she walks across that stage at 18, if she doesn't have a place to belong to, she's now an adult on her own. Talk a little bit about the profile of kids that are in foster care. People sometimes think these are problem kids. Really, the kids are there because other people have problems that should be taking care of them.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes we think a kid ended up in the foster system because they did something wrong, that there's a juvenile delinquency, but that's not the case. It's that the people who were supposed to love them didn't, and they were exposed to neglect or abuse, and so they're hurting children, and yet they're precious children.
And they're often bounced around so much, Jed. I mean, some kids that I've talked to have been in maybe 11 different foster homes before they graduate from high school. That's a travesty.
Absolutely. That would be typical of a child that grew up in the foster system. They would have known many, many different homes, some of which may have been loving and welcoming, many of which were not.
Yeah. You talk in your book, Upended, about apprenticing. Tell me about that.
Well, you know, you think of like a young painter in the workshop of Michelangelo, watching the master, the way he mixes paint, the way he flicks his wrist when he paints. And I think that's how we should approach Jesus. You know, he not only talks about eternity and eternal grand truths, but how to live life well, how to love, how to meet people and connect with them. And if we come to Jesus, not just seeing him as a ticket into heaven, but ultimately how to live daily life well, that really upends the way we experience normal life.
Well, and when you describe it that way, then it becomes really the mandate of the church to step in and to be the answer for these kids.
Absolutely. And you know, loving orphans is nothing new for the church. At our best, throughout history, Christians have been the ones who have sought out the children that it seemed no one else wanted and found them and loved them because we were loved first that way. That's how God has pursued us and drawn us to himself. And so when we understand how we have been loved, it's just natural that we would seek out kids in the foster system, orphans around the world, and seek to love them just like we've been loved.
Yeah. And yet not always easy to follow that mandate. What would you suggest that people consider before they decide to try to foster?
Well, you know, absolutely. Love is always costly. And it's no exception loving children that are coming from difficult places. In fact, it's a special challenge because they often have deep hurts. And so drawing them near, drawing them into our homes or our lives, if we can become their mentors, whenever we come close to a hurting child, we will taste some of that hurt. That's what love does. That's what God's love did for us. He entered into our hurt. But at the same time, knowing that is how we have been loved, I think that's the wellspring of loving like that.
Yeah, I just can't imagine. You know, for so many people who adopt, of course, you have the ability to enter into this experience and knowing it's going to be the long term, the long haul. Fostering almost requires, in some ways, a deeper sense of commitment that you know it may be temporary. These children, many of them have families, and of course the goal is always to try to restore children with their families, but loving them for a season well can change their lives, can it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think of one young woman who was headed into the foster system, and then a couple in her church said, "Why don't you come and live with us?" And you know, she expressed to me, she said, all my life I'd heard about God as Father, God is loving me, but I don't think I ever believed it until this couple showed that to me and welcomed her in.
Yeah. You work with the Alliance. You head the Alliance for Orphans, and foster care is a part of that whole thing. What trends are you seeing? Because it seems like there's a move of God in the church today, that people are hearing what you're saying. They're seeing these kids that are in like the pieces that we just showed. They're hearing them say, I need a place to belong, somebody to love me.
Absolutely. You know, I think the church is really re-earning its historic reputation as a people that take special care for the fatherless. We're rediscovering James 1:27, the pure and faultless religion that looks after orphans and widows in their distress. And so just last week, there was a gathering of more than 2,500 people from 49 states, 25 countries, all gathered together this year in Nashville, learning how to do this wisely and well, how to love through adoption and foster care and mentoring and supporting work around the world. And it is just beautiful to see. You see the heart of God pulsing there.
You know, I was at the Alliance last year and saw people from not just the United States, but all around the world, and all united in this passionate heart to make a difference in the lives of kids. And I think people are doing that. There are lots of resources available too. So you're not the Lone Ranger if you're out there today, and you supply a lot of those at the Alliance.
Absolutely. Because it's a costly, challenging road, we need the community of the church. And so, you know, the Christian Alliance for Orphans really seeks to equip the local church community, not just individual families, but communities to do this together. Because even though we are not all called to adopt, we're not all called to foster, we all can play a role in loving the orphan.
Yes, and that's a role that's becoming more and more significant in churches around the country. Even Jonathan Good's Faultless film, you know, something every believer really ought to see and pray about and contemplate, God, what would you have me do? That's sort of the beginning, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And our prayer is that ultimately the local church in every nation would be known as the primary answer for the orphans in their midst. So for us in America, that's kids in the foster system especially.
Almost 500,000 of them. We need to understand the significant need. Jed Medifin, we want to thank you for being with us. We want to also thank you for the great message in your book. It's Upended, How Following Jesus Remakes Your Words and World. It's available nationwide. By the way, if you want to help out, if you want to look into foster care, adoption, but specifically this month we're focusing on foster care, we have resources available for you on our website. All you have to do is log on to cbn.com.